Hello and welcome to the Real Drunk Show. Today we are talking defunding the police. I have with me today two of my favorite organizers in the whole wide world, Rahel and Da'Shaun. How are y'all?
Good.
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Good. We're going to start off today with introductions. So tell us your name, your location, what you do, what you're drinking if you're drinking anything, and one thing that gave you joy this week because it's been kind of hard to find joy. Da'Shaun, you want to get it started?
Let's do it. Yes. So I am Da'Shaun Harrison. They them pronouns. I live here in Atlanta. I also organize here in Atlanta. So I organize with Solutions Not Punishment Collaborative here in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a Black trans-led abolitionist organization. And I also work as the associate editor for Warrior Voice magazine, which is an independent feminist magazine ran and operated by Black and brown folks. So that is my work. And this week, honestly, I've been working like 16, 17, 18 hours work days. So in moments where I'm able to really relax, I've been watching like Whitney Houston Shady Moments on YouTube.
Oh, yes.
It really brings me so much joy, y'all. Like I really feel like that was my auntie. So I'll be watching all of her shit on YouTube, like, girl. That's been bringing me the laughs this week, y'all, for real.
Oh, I love it. Appreciate it. Rahel.
Oh my God. Thank God for YouTube. So you can just watch like 5 minutes of joy.
Literally.
Yes. My name is Rahel. I live right now in Oakland, California. I lived for a long time and organized for a long time in New York City. Supposed to be heading back there, and then life happened. The world happened. I find my political. I'm saying. But I find my political home with Black Youth Projects 100, BYP 100, which is a collective of Black 18 to 35-year-olds who are working towards a world that has like liberation for all Black people under a Black queer feminist lens. And so that's where I find my political home. And I also have been organizing recently with the Black LGBTQ Migrant Project, really trying to make sure that Black voices and Black queer voices are not lost in the immigrant narrative, because that's an existential threat, especially when Black folks and Black queer folks are both detained and deported at a rate that is like totally not in line with our percentages in this country. And so, yeah, like always within that Black queer feminist lens, just like in everything. So the thing that brought me joy and the thing I'm drinking on right now is the same thing. I live with a roommate, and they made hibiscus tea situation yesterday. And I have been drinking on that with a little bit of mezcal, and it's bringing me joy. You got to find it where you get it, I guess. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
It's really good, y'all. It's really, really good.
Y'all drinking on drinks. I'm drinking on water. So I don't know what's going on. Let me go grab me a drink. Shit.
Get one. Yo,
Go grab one. I'm introducing myself, so go grab you a drink real quick.
Okay.
All right. So I am Kia. Kia speaks on the interwebs. I'm here in Atlanta, and each week I bring some of my people together, right, to have conversations around culture, theology, justice issues. And this week we are talking defunding the police because I first heard about defunding the police in passing about 6 years ago, and it made absolutely no sense to me. It was like, what is life without the police? And then I was working at Spelman College at the time, and Angela Davis came, and someone asked her a question about it. And the way she broke it down, that the majority of our crime is related to our broken social structures. And if we invest in those social structures, we don't need the police to micromanage behavior. And I was like, that makes sense. But it never became like a mainstream topic all these years. It was like this, it it was a grassroots conversation that I heard going on. So, and I know, Rahel, like, you have been in this work for a long time. How did you get in the work, into organizing around defunding the police?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like a lot of folks in the aftermath of Trayvon Martin's murder, and then the total lack of accountability, let alone justice, right? Like, justice wasn't even the ask at that point. It was like literally accountability, like punishment, staying by the same. Okay, let's play by these rules of the carceral system of the police, accountability, and seeing in that work the deep like hopelessness that people started to feel, and organizing around that, and very similar things, right? Started reading some Angela Davis. I had, like, on a theoretical level been thinking about this, but never for real until like I saw that level of hopelessness and people that I thought were like, people I was organizing with and who were, I was, really young, being brought into organizing circles and seeing these people who I like held to such high regard, feeling so hopeless because accountability didn't feel possible. And so that really was the beginning for me. And then Miriam Kaba, who founded an organization called Survived and Punished, who I love. Yes. Okay. As soon as
I knew y'all would love each other.
Yes. So Miriam Kaba, founder of Survived and Punished, has a way of talking about carceral feminism, right? And about what it means to think about like these systems that actually harm us as the same systems that are somehow going to protect us from interpersonal harm. Like, how does that make sense? No. And that was really the beginning of it for me. And really just like listening to people like Miriam Kaba, like Andrea Ritchie, like as they presented what is possible, but also presented what is true right now, right? What is true right now is that the police are not keeping us safe, right? So the first step is you have to accept that. Like, that's true.
Yes.
Now what's next? So that was really the major point of entry for me. And then thinking through a Black queer feminist lens with BYP 100, like, if you are censoring the most marginalized in our communities, right? If you are censoring the liberation of like my Black trans sisters, have the police ever centered their survival or their liberation? Okay, so how can I align myself with the police if I call myself centering Black trans lives? So that, starting to make those connections and really thinking and getting right and getting straight about like what my values were. Yeah.
Da'Shaun, how did you come to this work?
So funny enough, I turned 18 in July 2014. And that very next month, I went to Atlanta. I came here to Atlanta to be at Morehouse during the week of NSO. And Kaya, NSO is stressful.
Wait. Tell me about NSO.
I can't tell you about NSO.
Yeah, so we'll just say this. At both of our schools, Spelman and Morehouse, NSO, New Student Orientation Week, it is very much a haze. We'll just keep it that way. It is getting students acquainted with the schools in a way that that exhausts you. And
also weirdly makes you fall in love with the school.
Yes.
Weirdly enough.
Word indoctrination, but
so it's like trauma bonding.
Truly, it is
Basically, they try to trauma bond with each other.
Yeah. But during that week was when Mike Brown was murdered. And so I was the very first protest that week. And I have been organizing ever since. So like November of 2014, right after Darren Wilson, the officer who murdered him, didn't get an indictment.
That was on my birthday.
I would have been
with a bottle of tequila that night. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I'd have been out. Like, what?
Yeah.
That night is when we started up AUC Shut It Down. Something got to give. There has to be a space for Black folks to be able to express our rage and to channel this into something else, to imagine something better, right? And from that moment forward, I've been on the ground here in Atlanta doing work around a lot of different issues. And so now most of my work is centered around racial justice as well as Black, queer, and trans liberation. And of course, I do a lot of work around fat liberation too.
Awesome. So if you're watching us today, you can join the conversation on Facebook or YouTube. Just send us a comment and we can pop those questions or comments up on the screen and get them answered as we go. So first question, what does it mean to defund the police?
I feel like this is a great first question because I feel like there's been a lot of really interesting like mental and verbal gymnastics happening on the internet to somehow make work, right? So defund the police means defund the police, like take money away from the police.
Okay.
You know,
pretty straightforward,
right? And so I feel like there's been a lot of really interesting redefining of words. And so when I think defund the police, I think, okay, the police budget, there's a line item. Often in a lot of cities, it's very convoluted and all over the place. Like in New York City, for example, it's very difficult to actually figure out how much money goes to policing because they tuck in policing in other budgets, right? For example, the New York City school Department of Education has police line items in it, right? That are separate from the police budget.
Wait, this is fascinating to me because the police budget in most cities is also like double of the budget of everything else.
Super high, but there's also often still police line items in other budgets.
Oh wow.
Right? So it literally means every step that you need to do to get money out of police hands.
Yep.
And into community hands. So yeah.
Yes, literally. Like I think I've seen so many people online talking about, like you said, all these different definitions of it. But it's been mapped out for years, not only by Movement for Black Lives, but by other like radical Black feminist abolitionists forever, right? And like it literally means, like you said, taking funding away from police. So implementing policies to make it easier to fire police when they use excessive force, cutting their salaries exponentially over time until there's no more left to give, right? Removing and reallocating funds or extra funds you would give to police to other spaces that would better care for community. In a lot of ways, like that's what we're pushing for here in Atlanta. One of the organizations called Women on the Rise pushed for the closing of ACDC, our Atlanta jail. And Keisha and the city council with their underhanded asses.
I was ready. As soon as I heard that, Keisha paused. I was like,
you know, it's something coming with their underhanded asses. They had tried to they proposed an allocation of $23 million to the jail that is supposedly closing, right? So there was just an action recently that was like, Keisha, no cuffs, care, right? Like, take off the cuffs and put the money into care. What's going to care for folks? What's going to care for community, and not this jail that is sitting mostly empty from day to day, right? Like there has not been any more than 10 people a day within ACDC. So what are you funding $23 million for? Funneling $23 million for to a jail that you are supposedly closing, right? So like it looks like pulling that money away from these prisons and police and giving it to the community, literally.
So in taking this money away from the police, you're also taking power away from the police, correct? And putting it into the community's hands.
Yep.
And I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was like, I think that's where we're like in an exciting ass place because finally, like that piece, we can finally start visioning about what comes next, right? Like we can start finally having these conversations on a broad stage of like, okay, let's take $1 billion away.
Right.
What could people really do with that, right? And like I feel like when the Movement for Black Lives came out with their week of action and the Thursday action was community control over budgets, I was like, finally we're being able to talk about what it can look like to not just have budgets that reflect our values, but to like actually like even ask communities like, what are your values? Like, what do you want? Right?
What do you want? That is so important.
And rare, right? Like we really turned a corner. So people are talking about things like participatory budgeting, like being able to like have a city budget or a state budget or a school budget, whatever, have a chunk of money and say to the people who this money theoretically is supposed to serve and say, okay, what do you want?
Oh, I love that so much.
Oh my goodness.
The people don't ask us what they want.
What they need.
Knows we know what we want. We know what we need. We know what it looks like to imagine a better world. Folks out here who are doing the organizing are not these ivory tower ass niggas. It's those of us who've been out in the streets and community members who have been building the communities around them for forever. Like they know what they want, they know what they need. All they need is the resources to do it.
And the power. And like there are, when you talk about like resources and power, like a lot of these like alternatives, a lot of these things of like transformational justice, like people are doing it on their own in certain scales. Like think about when you talk about, you know, people like gathering elders for things or whatever the case may be, like people are doing creative interventions with no resources, with no like institutionalized power. Imagine like if they had control over millions of dollars instead of people who have a line item literally for paying off people that they abuse.
Right.
Like,
so what I'm hearing, what I heard on television was defund the police means there will be no police. So, but what I'm hearing y'all say is that's not necessarily the case. Is defunding the police different from abolition? And like, where do those two fit in the communities we're trying to build?
I love that question, and I think it's an important one to ask. Defunding the police is not different from abolition. It's a step towards abolition.
Yes.
What people have been misinterpreting throughout all of this, or maybe not even misinterpreting, but rather misappropriating, right, throughout all of this, is like this idea that that you can defund the police without abolishing them. And that's never been an abolitionist thought, right? And I think people have tried to reduce defund the police into a reformist reform rather than go to abolition. And what I mean by that, for those who may not know, is there are reforms implemented and introduced by reformists who want police in the state and the world to exist as it does.
Like body cameras.
Right, like body cameras and you know, like accountability processes that are open to the public with your police, like these type of things that don't actually do any real thing for police or for ending like police murders. But it's not a reformist reform. It is an intentional goal to abolition. And there is no defunding the police without also demilitarizing the police, which then leads us to abolishing the police. It has to be this 3-step plan. Of course, it's not actually 3 steps, but like that's always been the 3 things: defund, demilitarize, abolish.
Yes. Yeah. And like the different, I love that you pointed out this difference between a reformist reform and an abolitionist reform, right? Like, and I think it was critical resistance. But
yes, critical resistance.
I believe, right?
Yes.
So, and they have this way, like, how can you tell? Yes. Okay. How can you tell? They have a whole resource. That's why when people are like, oh, in the last 11 days, I'm like, nah, years and years of work around this. Yes, Da'Shaun. Yes.
This is my abolitionist Bible.
Yes. It's a reference guide, and they have in there a resource.
Type in the chat the name of that book, please.
Now, child, I'm new to this. How to that?
I'm on my phone. But Da'Shaun figures. But there's this thing of like, how do you tell the difference between? Because like, if the system is good at anything, it's maintaining itself, and like it's good at the okie doke and like getting you while you're looking over here. And like, they have this guide around how to tell the difference between an abolitionist reform and a reformist reform. Yeah. And like one of the main ones that always sticks with me is, does this give more power or resources to the police?
Yes.
Oh.
So if it does, it's not so body cameras. Actually, you're giving them money, saying here's some body cameras, and so they're like, okay, well, here's some recordings of us acting a fool.
Right.
Cool. Like, which has helped the abolitionist cause, but that wasn't the goal. Giving them money to do sensitivity trainings. A young organizer in San Jose who performed these sensitivity trainings for many years with the San Jose PD was brutalized by the police just last week at a protest after providing them with these sensitivity trainings, right? So that's not an abolitionist reform. Community-based policing, right? So basically they pay for the cops to take field trips into the communities that they're going to come terrorize. Not an abolitionist reform.
Well,
right?
Funny. Stop it.
Literally.
Well, that's what it is. Literally. They're like, oh, come like play basketball with the kids. Now, like, are you motivated to not be a killer? No. So, and this idea, I think, of like, oh, but what would we do without police? I think that that's a very natural idea, because we're taught to believe that the police are a part of just like nature, right? Like we need police, we need laws, but if you ask most Black people, actually most people, has a cop ever made you feel safe?
You know what? I thought about that not long ago. Like, when have I called the police officers and they really did they did something to like benefit my quality of life? And the answer was never. Every time I have ever had to call the cops, it was around property. And they never even put in the effort to find my property or who had taken my property.
Right.
Most that I got was a police report that I could take to my insurance company. And I don't need a man with a gun to do that.
Right. And quite honestly, the truth of the matter is, if you ask most Black folks if they've called the police, the answer is no. I have never in almost 24 years of my life called the police. I've never had to call them, right? And even when I was in moments of conflict and of harm and all the things, right? Like a lot of us, so many of us have never called the police. And so I always ask people in those moments where you have chosen not to call the police or you didn't call the police, what did you do, right? Like what did you come up with to find safety, to feel safe, to feel like removed from harm? And now how can we imagine that as a communal response to harm?
Yeah. What have folks, Da'Shaun, what have folks said to you in response to that?
Yeah, a lot of folks are like talking about how they call, their cousin Pookie, or how they, a lot of folks even are talking about how they actually talk to people, right? Which is so.
Imagine that.
Imagine that, right? Like imagine being able to talk through conflict, talk through harm. Who would have thunk it? Like these are like a lot of times the responses that people give me is like, well, I never actually thought about it, but I had a conversation with them, or I called on like people who were in my community to like figure out how we could create a safety net for me in the moment. Like, what is it that I can do to change that violence, like whatever it might have been, right?
Yeah.
That's what people were talking about. That's what people were calling on. That's what people were doing in their community already. And it's like, if we can imagine that on a small scale, if we are doing that within a group of 4, 5, 6 neighbors, right?
Yeah.
What happens when we develop a community accountability process across the board for our entire community?
Yeah.
So one thing that you guys were just talking about was the difference between an abolitionist reform and a reformist reform, correct?
Yes.
So what caught a lot of press this week was Campaign Zero's 8 steps. Well, damn. Was that an abolitionist reform or a reformist reform?
That was
what we
reform.
And the response was a great example of a creative intervention, right? So a group of abolitionist feminists came together and created 8 to Abolition, which you can visit 8toabolition.org, I believe. .com. Look it up. 8-2, but it's .com. You're right. But they took exactly those reforms and were like, what looks like when we make this actually an abolitionist reform? And they pulled that together quick.
In 2 hours. Quick. I would say those are some of my niggas and some of my non-niggas.
Same.
Right. I know you know them folks too. Like,
oh my God.
Those are folks. But literally, like, and you know what? I also want to name that Brittany Packnetti specifically. I appreciate her because she not only came out, Sam also came out and said that he didn't know about some of the things, but Brittany took it a step further and said, I didn't not only know about this, but I participated in something that was harmful, and I'm including myself in that, and I'm lifting the work that these abolitionists have done. And that, to me, is exactly what accountability looks like and what it means to work through harm and conflict, right? Like, that was like the perfect, beautiful example of how we work through this harm and how we work through this world to abolition. And it was perfect.
Yes. And another major thing that I really appreciate about the 8 to Abolition so the website is the number 8 abolition.com, and they acknowledge the work and the people whose shoulders they stand on within that, right? So there's this desire right now to write over all of the amazing work that has been happening. Literally. And oh my God, suddenly in 2 weeks, everyone's talking about defunding the, and yes, this is definitely it's an accelerant moment, right? But there's been work around this, and that's why these people who are showing appreciation and love to the work that came before them were able to pull something together in 24 hours.
Right.
Because they've been organizing, they've been doing the work, they've been building relationships. And so, yeah.
Those are people who have been doing the work long before it was public and popular. So when these conversations come up, they can jump in them immediately with the facts, with the information to see people through.
Right. Creative intervention. Yeah.
So, and I think you all have done a lot of answering this question, but I just want to name it just in case there's anything you want to add. How does defunding the police make our communities better, safer?
Yeah, I think that goes back to a lot of what Rahel was saying. That means that there's less police in our communities, right? Because if you're not hiring any new police officers, which is part of what defunding police looks like, then there's less police to police us, right? And so that could potentially look like less police murders, right? Because if there's less officers, there's less of them to murder us. But also, if there's a policy implemented or a rule implemented for it to be easier to fire them should they use excessive force, that's less of them off the streets, right? It looks like being able to take away their money and their resources, like access to lawyers and all these other things that oftentimes get them off after
the police unions.
Right. It takes away from the police unions. It takes it completely changes how we're able to show up or how we're able to show up in our own communities because police no longer have the power and the resources that they once did to be able to police us without consequence and to harm us and to abuse us without consequence. And now it says my niggas can be out on the streets or in their cars or in her bed, right? And not have to worry about being murdered or being beaten or being harassed or being tear gassed because police have the authority given to them to be above the law because they are the ones who get to upkeep the law or maintain the law, right?
What's interesting is NYPD, they were protesting. I think it was around Eric Garner, and they decided that people were being mean to the police and they were going to pull all their officers off the street. And crime actually went down when they were not around.
Yes.
I believe it.
Yes.
It didn't work out the way they thought it would.
No. And it's also it goes back to what Da'Shaun was saying earlier, you broke it down really nice with the 3 steps, but you were demilitarize the police.
Yes.
As a part of it. NYPD is a military grade police force.
Literally.
Who are you waging a war on? If you're the military, right? Other than civilians, right? So this idea of demilitarizing, after the protests really started in full heat, especially in Minneapolis, folks were showing folks made a meme that was look at the police compared to healthcare workers, right? And they showed healthcare workers in garbage bags trying to makeshift PPE. Y'all couldn't find the money we couldn't find the money to provide adequate PPE, adequate protection to healthcare workers.
Right.
And we got transformer looking police. What? You can't even look.
Showing up to peaceful protests.
Showing up to protest.
Farmers.
Showing up to protest and saying, if we don't have tear gas, I guess we could shoot them. This is what we have right now. So I think this idea of demilitarizing and taken away by firing cops, but also by reducing what we pay for their gear.
Right.
Reducing what we pay. They got armored trucks. Why are you? I was in New York. I want to say last year, just on my way somewhere in Times Square, and there was an armored truck in Times Square. I was like, why? Armored truck for NYPD officers with guns like down their legs. Why? Where are you going? You're in Times Square. So, I mean, I think this is a part of it. And then I also think there's this idea, you said, how will defunding the police make us safer?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think this goes back to what you said at the beginning too, Kia, around people, like, there's not adequate public housing. There's not adequate transportation. There's not adequate education. There's not adequate healthcare access, all because we supposedly don't have the money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you defund the police and invest in communities, if you defund the police and invest in communities by, goes back to asking people what they need, looking really into what people need instead of deciding what they need for them.
Ooh, yes.
Like, that makes us safer. That makes us safer. When the NYPD murdered Akai Gurley on the steps of a project building, they claimed that they felt, unsafe, because the lights, first of all, he was on the steps because the elevator wasn't working. Second of all, the police officer, Peter Liang, felt unsafe because the lights weren't working in the stairwell. And then all of this unsafe, inadequate investment in public housing resulted in a young man being dead.
Yeah.
Right?
So if they've taken away the money from the police to put it into our public housing, it
would be alive.
A situation where this person never would have been murdered by.
He would have been alive. Peter Liang never would have been on the steps of that project house, first of all, because we defund them. He would have never been there. The money that it took to keep Peter Liang and his superior officer, who told him to wait and call his union rep before he called an ambulance, both of them would not have been there. These two men did not make the people in the pink houses safer.
Right.
What would have made the people in the pink houses safer would have been working lights and a working elevator. Right?
That's
so
it runs so deep. I'm glad that you mentioned like how militarized our police really, really are. In the last few weeks here in Atlanta, right, like we have literally been in the middle of a war zone. There are like Homeland Security has been deployed here. Over 1,500 National Guard has been deployed here. There have been officers on bikes, on horses, in Humvees, in cars, in armored trucks. Like, it's a war zone. And it's like, you're doing all this for niggas who are out in the streets protesting. No, like we're protesting for Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed up the motherfucking road from Atlanta, right? Like, we're protesting about George Floyd and Tony McDade and Breonna Taylor, all these people that y'all are murdering. And your response to that is not to hear and care for the civilians that you are supposedly hired to protect and serve, right? But rather to brutalize and militarize yourself against them because you recognize the fact that you are not here to protect and serve them. Your only job is to protect property. And I'm glad this person mentioned this about police officers. I was going to say that right now.
Yes.
A lot of police officers in this country, and Atlanta I can speak to specifically, are trained through the Gilly program, which sends them to Israel to be trained by the same Israelis that are occupying Palestinian land and engaging in apartheid Israel, right? So like, these are the officers that are out here militarizing and policing our streets, right? These are the police officers who go across seas to fucking Israel, of all places, to be trained to come back here to deal with Black folks. That's who we're being policed by.
Raven also says a $500 million police budget, but they're okay with having one school counselor for 600 plus kids.
Speak on it.
Please.
Speak on it.
Right, Raven. I love Raven so much. I love her. But literally, and like Atlanta has its own police force. The school, not Atlanta Public Schools has its own police force. APS has its own police force.
Oh my God.
Like Raven just said, they only have one school counselor for 600 plus kids, but you have a whole police force for children. That's the pipeline. And defunding the police means taking away those police officers from, or the resources to be able to have a police force specific to kids in kindergarten through 12th grade.
Yes. And that's an example of a reformist reform, right? Like, ain't that, because the way that stuff ends up happening is people say, oh, we shouldn't have the police in the schools. They don't know how to deal with kids. Oh, let's make a police force for kids. And that's the okie doke, right? That's the real. And when Brittany Packnett talked about the 8 can't wait thing, whatever, as harmful, that's what she's referring to. This is real harm that happens when these reforms get made, because people cling on to them, right? And all these resources go towards them, and the harm, like, whoever like came up with this idea of having this specific police department, and you think about the child, what it does to someone's like psyche to have these cops, you know what I mean, to have these cops assigned to you. Also, like, the violence that these children have certainly experienced, right? This is direct harm. Reform is harmful a lot of these times.
So y'all's president said,
stop it.
Y'all's president said that y'all came for the guns, and now y'all want to get rid of all the police. So it's just going to be anarchy in the country with all this conversation.
As there should be.
First, y'all came for the guns.
Turn into the purge, he said. Like,
first of all, cops would be first in line at the purge. Let's get that straight.
Right.
Like,
touche.
I mean, Da'Shaun, I really am curious about what you feel about this, but I think that it's really interesting that we have a president who has been accused of sexual assault as many times as this president has, who has been accused of abusing his power, right? Of all these things that are theoretically against the law, right? Talking to us about what is right.
Right.
And about the purge and about chaos. Considering. That's first of all. Second of all, this is also a president who tear gassed protesters for a photo op of himself walking, right? This is a moment of opportunity for this person. So this is a moment of opportunity for this person, and this narrative, at this point, he's grasping for straws. He's hosting a campaign. Someone correct me if I'm misstating this, right? But because I try my best to ignore this situation, but I heard that he plans to host a campaign event in Tulsa, Oklahoma on Juneteenth.
Yes.
Right. So this is what the seeds that this person is trying to plant, right? So I try my very best. Adrienne Marie Brown says, "What you pay attention to grows." I try my very best to not water those seeds, because there are creative interventions, right? If y'all want to buy up the tickets for his little campaign rally,
yes, I saw
and not show up, that's a thing. There are creative interventions. I don't know that those creative interventions are my lane, but yeah, responding to that idea, I don't have it.
It was funny. I saw a tweet. He said something about, who will you call when someone is raped? And someone responded like, "Oh, you care about rape now?"
Right. Like,
bro. First of all. Second of all, look at just the numbers of sexual assaults at the hands of police.
Right.
Like, who you gonna call? What?
And the fact that 98% of men who are accused of rape don't ever see the inside of a jail. So it's hey, what's going on? Let's figure this out. What's happening? Right.
The percentage of rape kits that are just sitting untested.
Mm-hmm.
In Grady alone. Now I be in Atlanta's ass, because this is really my city, and I be on their ass. I be on their ass.
As you should be, Appreciate you.
Alone, just last year or the year before, there was a whole report that came out about there being hundreds of rape sitting in Grady Hospital, and I know Atlanta for real.
Yes.
Now you know what Grady is like. Mm-hmm. So that didn't surprise me at all. But I'm like, this is it's happening right here, in our own backyard. And if it's happening in the biggest city, one of the biggest cities in the country.
Yeah, what I've noticed about people in Atlanta, Black folks in Atlanta, they are quick to defend APD, because APD be jamming with them at the festivals. They don't wake them up when they smoking weed and listening to like Outkast at Centennial Park. So APD,
and then they will lock your ass up. They will jam with you in their motherfucking car and then say, now you're going to jail.
Yeah, it's an abusive relationship. It's an abusive relationship. You're like, oh, but he did the electric slide with me one time.
Like, it's so weird because the video that just went viral here of the fucking National Guard doing the fucking Macarena right before this, right before tear gas niggas.
Yep, the NYPD kneeling with people and then tear gassing them 30 minutes later. It's an abusive relationship. It's an abusive relationship.
It literally, the military calls it, and I only know this because of a friend of mine who is a veteran, but the military calls it heart and mind or something like that. Where they go into the neighborhoods and they give the kids, you know, like something to eat, or they talk to them and they let them think that they're like on their side, and then go to war. Then they start bombing their homes and they start shooting their parents, right? And it's like it's a tactic to really like make us feel trustful of the police, so that they can continue to hold on to the authority that they have, and allows for them to act in the way that they do. And it's so disgusting. It's like it really angers me. It hurts me because these institutions have been harming us from day one, and the tactics that the state gets to deploy because they have the resources to do so, just shouldn't be. It should have been intervened with a long time ago.
All right, I want to go to some of the comments that are popping up. Let's see. Rod said, and they're talking about having to make more cuts on teachers for the next school year in a lot of districts. And I think this is part of the opportunity that a lot of organizers who've been doing this work for a long time see. COVID-19 has changed city budgets a lot. So this is our opportunity to say, no, we don't have to cut schools, but we can go in here, take this money from the police, put it in schools, and to start defunding that way.
Yeah, and be really clear what you mean by put it in schools.
And not put it in school police.
Not put it in school.
Honestly, not even allocating that money to the U.S. school system still reproduces harm, right? Because we have one of the more harmful school systems in the U.S. And if there is no real school reform or real overhaul of what is happening with our schools, you're going to give money to counselors who are not trained and prepared to deal with Black kids and Black queer kids and Black trans kids. You're going to give money to teachers who are not prepared to deal with more Black kids in their classrooms, right? Who don't know what it really means to reckon with their own whiteness and their own Blackness. Right? Or money to principals who are invested in the school to prison pipeline, who want to detain and put in detention our Black students, and suspend our Black students, right? So we have to give more money to a Black radical education reform, a Black radical education overhaul that allows for our educators and our like schools to be better for our students in ways that wouldn't give them more resources.
Yes. And that's where community control, like I feel like that.
Exactly.
That's where that comes in, right? Community control over these funds. I've only lived in Oakland for a little bit, but there's like amazing organizing happening here all the time, right? But there's an organization called the Black Organizing Project that's been working to remove police from Oakland United School District schools, right? And Oakland United School District schools have been in like a tumultuous situation for a while, right? With like teachers going like on strike, like just because the budget cuts are really like, when you look at it, like it's overwhelming. You're like, how can you possibly think that this makes sense to cut the budget this way and have OPD, Oakland Police Department presence there? And they've been organizing for years to remove the police department. They're like making some headway this year, which is amazing, but due to years and years of them doing the work. And the like literally tens of millions of dollars that have been taken away from schools, literally just to make the schools whole again. You have to defund the police, or you have to remove the police from the school just to make them whole. And then you have to defund the police to have the spaciousness, right? Like the economic spaciousness to think about community control, to think about what a safe school looks like, to think about what a school where like kids can learn looks like, and where kids can have whole experiences, right? Like, so that like a 13-year-old who's like battling with whatever's going on at home, but also like trying to like figure out their sexuality and trying to think through whatever homework has been assigned, doesn't get put into the school to prison pipeline due to a bad day. Because Black girls are like often left out of this equation, but Black girls are kicked out of school at the highest numbers.
Yeah.
Right? For behavior. Mm-hmm. So for having feelings and being people.
Now let's get into
All right. Yes. Push out. Check that book out. There's a film.
Yes.
Please check it out.
It's by Monique W. Morris. I don't know.
Okay. Gotcha.
Definitely check it out. And there's also there's an organization in New York City called Girls for Gender Equity, GGE.
Yes.
That's doing that work. Also just around the fact that like, there's this, I'm bad with studies or whatever, but there was a study that was done somewhere where people were talking about how Black folks we are robbed of our youth. We're robbed of our youth. Like, oh, he's just a kid. Remember when Tamir Rice was brutally murdered? The excuse was that he was tall for his age.
Mm-hmm.
Right. A child. When young Black girls, when Centoya Brown was unjustly incarcerated for years and years and years, in incredible violence, the idea that like she was a child when that happened, right, to her, and all they could focus on was trying to treat her as not only like victim blame her, but also like really rob her of her youth, right? This idea that like Black girls can't be are fast or this or that, and that's why things happen, right? So the fact of having police in schools, or the fact of like thinking about dedicating budgets to policing of children, is, let's not pretend that that's anything but anti-Black, right? Because the children that are being policed are Black children,
right?
Because they're robbed of their childhood.
Right? And you know what? My son went to this big fancy private school with open campus and like a bunch of white. I mean, I will say it was diverse for the school of its type. Like all the rappers' kids went there as well. But I remember seeing like one security guard there. In general, like those kids were not policed at all.
Mm-hmm. And I bet that one security guard knew all the Black kids' names though, because it doesn't matter. Like it won't. I don't know. The cloak of whiteness doesn't work on us.
Yeah,
it won't protect you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Matt Locke says, do you guys have any advice for people looking to do similar organizing, but in really small towns and counties?
I do, actually. I come from a really small town. I was born and raised in Wilmington, North Carolina. And so, yes, that's
right. I a guy from there. Y'all trash.
Now, I don't know how this got into this narrative. I don't know what I did to deserve this narrative, okay?
That's a different podcast. Okay, it's a different podcast.
Let me hop I can talk about that. They are trash. They really are. But that's where I was born and raised at. Now, I actually, when I first moved to Atlanta, I went back to, I think I was in either Greensboro or Greensboro, one of the Greens towns, to do like a training with, I will not say who was with because I don't actually fuck with them no more. But
that's fair.
But,
that's real.
It's real. But like there was
life is long.
Hey, it happens. But there was a training that happened in North Carolina that was specific to like working through what it means to organize in rural areas. In these places, somebody's asking. I posted the book. It's called Push Out. It's called Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools. Sorry. But so there's like the way that you are able to really do that, and this is something I told somebody just last week, is if there are no organizations in your city or in your town, if there are there's no specific structure around that, right? I think the best thing for you to do is find folks who are down, who you have like an aligned politic with, right, to create the infrastructure. And that it really means being intentional about not only doing the reading, because that really matters, but also being in connection with folks online. And I'm so thankful for what Online Spaces has done to be able to work with and talk through these like possibilities with folks who have been organizing already, so that you are able to build infrastructure that works best for your city while being guided by people who are willing to assist you in that. Because it is hard to organize in rural areas. There's no real resources. There's no real funding, especially like for those of us who are in the South. Even Atlanta, there's no real funding for southern cities because niggas hate Black folks because they think that all the Black folks in the South are connected to slavery. So since we're slaves, we obviously don't deserve no funding. I don't know. But that's really how they treat us. Like all the funding is in New York, in New Jersey, like all up north. So it really means like being in deep connection to your community to be able to build that infrastructure and to attain the resources that you need to be able to do that.
Yeah. That was beautiful. I'm so happy that you had that to share, because I was just like, shit, I don't know. But I will say that a thing that's been really beautiful to watch with the movement for Black Lives has been that kind of, that newfound, I don't know if it's newfound. I think it's been actually happening for a long time. And I think it's been people like you, Da'Shaun, saying exactly what you just said about like, where's the funding? Like what the fuck? Like, you know? And so like organizations like Song and Ignite and like, you know, they do really amazing shit, right? Like, and calling it out that like the funders are going where it's sexy. All right, cool. Let's make the South sexy. And like, there's a lot of cool shit happening. Also the movement for Black Lives, if y'all text, I promise I don't work for them, but if y'all text Defund to 90975, they are actually like doing like back and forth engagement through that text messaging program. So it's 90975 and just text Defend. And they're asking folks to like sign up, like say where you're at. Like, let's see if we can build those bridges. Like, who knows? Maybe you're sitting in your house talking about like, I don't know what to do. And there's someone a mile away who you haven't spoken to before, who's also like in their house texting. Like, let's, you know, they're trying to like see what those ecosystems, how online can really lead to offline organizing and change.
Yeah.
I've been really impressed with their work over the past 2 weeks.
The digital organizing is on point. The digital organizing is on point. Here's just like a total like side note, but you know how folks have been doing like social media pass the mic things all, you know, recently. Megan Rapinoe, the soccer player.
Oh yes,
passed her mic to the Movement for Black Lives digital organizer, Fresco Steez. And so if y'all check out Megan Rapinoe or check out, you know, Fresco Steez or Movement for Black Lives in general, you'll see like, so this is like digital organizing. People have been like working through what digital organizing means for a minute, right? Nobody knew that coronavirus was going to hit. Nobody knew that this moment was going to arise. But like, it's what we were talking about earlier about that deep relationship building and like organizing between the impact peak moments.
I just want to pop this up here for my Atlanta folks. Raven C said, Black folks don't want to let Paul Howard go, child.
Raven, let's talk about it.
Y'all want to let him go?
Paul Howard is our... Did he lose? Or he's in a runoff now, right?
I think he is in a runoff now, and it's time for him to go. He has to go.
So we are right now saying that you need to vote for Paul Howard. Opponent.
I don't even know who his opponent is.
Yo, stop it.
I want to say her name is Mary, Mari. I can't remember the last name right off the top of my head, but yeah. I know people who know her, so yeah.
Okay. Listen, I don't know her, so I won't publicly endorse her when I got on my Solution Not Punishment shirt. Right. But what I will say is, Paul Howard has to go. So whatever that means for you, that man gotta go.
Is it all like in-person voting right now?
So Atlanta mailed out absentee ballot applications to everyone. Back in March, back when we first started doing coronavirus quarantine. I want to say they're doing the same thing for November, or maybe you can just you have to request it for November.
I'm requested.
Okay, but you don't have to have, because usually you have to have an excuse, right? Like you're out of town or something.
Right.
So I think they're waiving that, but you have to request it for November.
Okay, so voter disenfranchisement is like alive and well.
Shit show down. Of course, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's. I do remember getting that in the mail though for this first time around, but I don't know if it'll be like that in November or not. Because they're trying to push us back out. So
I saw an email, but I didn't open it, so I need to open that email. So
I didn't either. I didn't either.
So if you live in Atlanta, you probably have an email saying something. We don't know what it says because we didn't read it.
Right.
What are some of these other comments? He's in a runoff. I was thinking, I think Honey and Raven are just having a conversation in the comments. Like, hey, I was talking about you on Tuesday. Okay, so one thing that has been really concerning to me is like our Democratic Party leaders sound a lot like Trump when it comes to defund the police. How does that make you all feel?
Yo, so I live in Oakland. I lived for many years in New York, but I was actually raised in St. Paul, which is like you know, right next to Minneapolis, right? So Midwest. When I saw these Black, mostly queer young people hold the mayor of Minneapolis accountable in public and unapologetically, like I felt this like bit of like hope. Right. I also was like, ooh, this poor man. Because literally, you know, they had a rally. Jacob Frey, the mayor, the progressive Democrat, like mayor of this young person of Minneapolis, came out. Right. Mm-hmm. And they said, are you ready to defund the police? And he said, no. He was like, no. The question was, are you ready to defund the police? And when he said no, they said, all right, take your ass home. Mm-hmm. And so, and Black Visions Collective, Reclaim the Black, like, I wish these organizations were around when I was there, you know what I mean? But they've been doing like years of that work. I left, you know, years ago, but I'm like, I watch these folks. I'm like, thank God for the internet where you can see this stuff in real time and just feel this like hope. And I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be easy. I don't think it's going to be fun. But like that level of accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Demanding that like, if you're going to be counting our votes before we cast them, like you're gonna be accountable to us, right? And just like being willing to not accept the okie doke, to not accept the 8 to 8 can't wait. You know what I mean? That's what it is to me. So yeah, I mean, if y'all check out Black Visions Collective on all the social medias, you can see them like tell this man to take his ass home if he's not ready to defund the police.
They're litty. They are really litty.
So I was really wrong on Paul Howard's opponent. It is Fonnie Willis.
Oh, I don't know
her. Yeah.
Fonnie Willis is Paul Howard's opponent in the runoff election. Do we need?
I just know Paul Howard can't stay. That's all.
That is the important point.
Right.
Do we need National Democrats to start defunding the police, or is this a local issue, or do we need the national voices to hop on with us? Because Joe Biden is against it. Nancy Pelosi is against it. James Clyburn, who is the highest ranking Black person in Congress, is against it.
Can we address Nancy Pelosi's like Black Student Union stole?
Yeah. I just want to say this real quick. James Clyburn is also who gave us Joe Biden as our 2020 presidential candidate. Like he endorsed Joe at the end of February, and everyone else just kind of fell in line, and Super Tuesday came, and boom, here we are. But yes, let's talk about Nancy Pelosi and her support of Blackness.
Yes, the Democrats stole their stoles from their Morehouse employees. That's all I could think that whole day. Kia really is drunk.
I only had one drink, guys. Okay, one.
All I could think about when I saw that video was, y'all know Morehouse alum go right up to motherfucking DC, and they gave them their stoves. That's all I could think.
That is a very Morehouse thing to do. Like,
it really is. Like, that's really something they would do. But no, I was like, y'all have to be kidding me. Like,
yeah.
Like, y'all
can't say Nancy. I can't. But Kia, I feel like that directly answers your question. Like, I feel like we don't know. We haven't. They are so far removed from where we're going, right? There are young, Black, queer, trans activists in Minneapolis holding their mayor accountable, refusing to like bow down to this man just because he says he's progressive. And then 24 hours later, we got Nancy Pelosi taking a knee, wearing kente cloth. Like that's how far detached from what this idea of like visioning and what is possible. They're so far removed from that at this point that it's like, I feel like the invitation is there for them to come along, but we can't expect them to count on them to be creating that space.
You keep going without them. Raven, who I'm about to kick out because she's being ridiculous. Nancy said blood in, blood out. Black lives.
Yo.
I completely forgot the point. What you were saying. I've been thinking a lot and meaning to write about this, but I might as well talk about it since I'm here. Like, civil rights and the Black church have always been very much connected. And now you have the largest civil rights movement the world has ever seen. You see it completely disconnected from the Black church. And you also see it being led by people who the Black church has disregarded and kicked out. Queer Black people, trans Black people, Black people with criminal records, and people who the church did not want to advocate for.
Yep.
And you see them advocating for lives that the church has said, that the church by its action have said are not valuable. Yep. And I think, if anything, that should be a point where church leaders are going and reflecting and seeing how they became so detached from valuing Black lives.
And from the heart of movement.
Yeah.
Like, literally the heart, like that thing that makes you feel like, oh, like maybe something is possible. Or like that thing is, I feel like that's what people go to often to spirituality or to church for. And like to be totally like disconnected from that, I don't know what that reckoning looks like.
I don't think that there is a reckoning.
Baby, moving behind and keep it moving.
Baby, let me tell you how Kia, I think you may know this about me, Rahel. You will learn quickly. I was raised in the Black church. Like, that was my home. I was preaching, Sunday school teaching, praise and worship leading every day. I was in church more than I was at home, right? Like, I was at school and I was at church. That was my life as a child before I went to Morehouse, which is so funny because all the folks said, don't let Morehouse turn you gay, and then here I am, a whole queer and trans. So here I am, Morehouse turned me gay, but that was my life, like that.
That's the clip right there. That's gonna be the.
That's the clip.
That is the promotional clip there.
But that really was like my life, and then I got to Morehouse, and I started studying under Dr. Daniel Black and Dr. Natasha Walker. And all these folks who really helped me connect the fact that, like, our spirituality as Black folks has never really been connected to the church as much as it has been connected to our community. And I think we are able to find a certain amount of freedom within the church because of how communal it is, right? When I first started going to protests, the things that we would do, the ways that we would interact with each other, how we would be amongst each other felt very reminiscent of a Black church without having to hear the teaching and preaching that was damning me to hell, right? And I realized, and the more I thought about that, the more I was able to really make a connection that, so much of our Black church traditions date back to slavery, right? Where folks are, wading in the water and calling, giving messages through song, right? And I recognize that so much of our connection is still in that. It's still connected to spirit, as folks call it, to the spirit realm, to spirituality through community, through connection, through cohesion, through oneness with each other. And I think that's why I don't ever want us to reckon with the church ever again. I want us to rid ourselves of the church. I want us to reckon with what it means to be communal and to see ourselves in community amongst each other, without ever having to be a part of an institution that is inherently anti-Black and inherently anti a lot of what so many identities we occupy. I really want us to know what it means to be spiritual beings, to be amongst community without having to be in church.
That's good. Connie said that her comment won't pop up. Hold on. They don't fit the Kodak picture like Claudette Colvin, who was the teenage pregnant mom who sat down on the bus. But they were like, yeah.
They recast the pilot.
Not you.
Yeah. You're not going to work. They needed Rosa to come because Rosa was a little more respectable.
Right.
And that shit's gone. Yeah. I love that you said that about the protest culture too, because you think about chants. And spirit in chants and enchanting and this idea of fortifying yourself with chants, right?
Yeah.
One of the first chants that I learned when I joined BYP 100, it was it's chant down Babylon, black people out of bomb. We ready. We coming. We ready. We coming.
Yes.
It's this thing of confidence, right? But it's also fortifying yourself. It's spiritual. There's a moment in it when you're you're with we ready, we coming. That shit is is a spiritual experience, right? And that piece of how it's not damning me to hell, that shit hit me. I'm oh shit.
I think that I think really what so much of us are seeking is to feel empowered, to feel powerful, to feel that we have a bit of power within a world that so often strips us of it, right?
Yeah.
I think that church makes us feel that way. We feel powerful, we feel connected, we feel heard and seen and thought of and protected and cared for.
Fortified.
Exactly, precisely. I love that you use that word. And I think that's why so many of us queers and trans folks, we really we're able to be at protests and feel that exact same thing, right? Because it really is communal. It's about our connectivity to one another. And I have never felt more powerful than when I've been out in the street. There's something very I don't know how to even really explain it, but there's something really special about taking space with niggas on ground that was built to kill you. And for us to say, you can't kill us here because we got each other. And we hold you down on this space that you built with the intentions to kill us. It's something really special.
It's otherworldly, yeah.
That makes me think of the video that I think it was New Orleans that's going viral now, where police had arrested this woman. The protesters in her car and demanded her release, and they released her, and you could just see it was a spiritual moment. That's all you can, like, you could see it on her face, you could see it on the face of the protesters, and the police were kind of just like I don't want to say at the mercy, but it was kind of just like they were left to.
They had no choice.
Yeah. Casilda says they're still kneeling like it's 2015. Every time someone kneels, I always quote Jay-Z, and I'm like, we passed that now.
Right.
Like,
also, just like while we're talking about spirituality, while we're talking about like that, the spirit realm and things like that, when you kneel for the amount of time that this man was being killed, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're kneeling for that long, who are you embodying? Right? You're embodying the killer.
No.
So what kind of disconnection from spirit, disconnection from, I don't know, anything, but like
no. You talking good, girl?
But no. I'm like,
I had to lean back like
what are you calling in? And and did you think about it?
No.
Like that's the other things. Like you didn't even think about it. You thought about the photo op.
Right.
That's all you thought about.
I will say this. For a moment, I thought Nancy had Megan Thee Stallion knees. I know my almost 40-year-old ass can't kneel for 8 minutes. So I was real impressed until I saw the video of her trying to get up in her little kitten heels.
Girl.
Well, I was like, see, this was just a bad decision all around.
I will say though,
2000s, girl.
My homegirl was like, she didn't even have a pillow.
She got a pillow.
Like, that was an opportunity to support a Black business with like some Kente knee pads. Like, if you're gonna go all out, go all out.
Do it. I can't.
Monique says that bottom line, we gotta get more progressive, younger people ready to run for office, and then we have to vote for them. And this kind of goes with a question that we got via email from Anna Naomi. How do we sell the idea of defunding police, especially to older folks who are convinced to the marrow of their bones that communism is the devil? And I also found myself having this conversation with older people who saw Joe Biden as like the safety net, the blanket. How do we get older people to embrace these more progressive values so that we can progress? Y'all be tired.
I don't know, but
that one, so
yeah. No, I mean, I don't have the answer, but what I do have is some interesting conversations that I've had with folks about moments when they have felt safest, right? Mm-hmm. Like when you have felt the most safe, when you have felt secure, when you have felt these things, like what was true, like what was the situation? Mm-hmm. And then like afterwards being like, was there a cop there? Mm-hmm. Right? Like what was the police a part of that? So why is it that like the police feel like an important part of our safety? That's first of all. Secondly, I think that there's this this thing that I do too, but like that some younger folks and like folks who do like movement or like organizing work do, right? Where somebody says something and then that's who they are for like ever, right? And I think there's a level of grace that's difficult that I don't necessarily have, right? But of allowing people to come around when they're ready. Mm-hmm. And the internet is a magical thing because I have seen people come around who 5 years ago.
We watched Don Lemon make a complete 360 from 2014 or 180. I'm sorry, from 2014.
Yeah, and people I know, like people in like you know what I mean, people in community who I know who are older, who have been like, oh well, no, like this is the thing, or people I know who were advocating hard for body cameras 6 years ago, who are like that didn't, you know, and like really like facing the pain of that and then being willing to do that next step. So I feel like that's a part of what I say to them is like, you know, like what does like let's talk about safety before we talk about police.
Yeah. I think I love that. Let's talk about safety before we talk about police. I love that so much. And I'm not drunk. I promise. I only had one drink too. But I love that. I love that. And I think that for me, I think the ways that I convince or try to persuade or bring people in any way, irrespective of their age, is to ask them to really sit with the willingness to be uncomfortable. Because nothing about any of this is comfortable. Nothing about any of this is like about learning that everything you know about life, that everything you've ever been taught about life is comfortable, right? But specifically with older Black folks, right? These are the folks who lived through the civil rights era.
Yeah.
These are the folks who lived through Jim Crow. These are the folks who lived through like all of these really major moments in history that bring us a lot of like ways to really connect with them, right? Like I think when I think about how I want to talk to other older folks, I think about how I would want somebody to talk to my Nana, right? Like I love my Nana, y'all. Like I love her, and so I think like, what would I want them to say? And I would want them to say, you know, like, well, Nana, I know you were born in 1947, right? So you really witnessed a lot of things, especially being born and raised in the South. My Nana was born and raised in North Carolina too, right? So what is it that you saw that made you feel, or what is it that you internalized that made you feel like the very people who you watched brutalize your mom, your dad, who brutalized you, right? Brutalized. My mom was born in '68, the year that MLK was murdered. She was born literally 3 months before MLK was murdered, right? What is it that you witnessed that made you internalize this idea that those same people, those same things would be safe for you today, right? And my Nana she really knows her stuff now. She be talking to me like, they killing them again, and they doing the same. You know, my Nana, she really be on her shit.
She with it.
She'll be on her shit. But I think about the grace, the level of grace, love, and care that needs to be provided to my elders because they lived through so much, right?
Yes.
And witnessed so much. And white supremacy, anti-Blackness really is indoctrinating. It really will teach you that the very things that you watch harm you and abuse you are the things for you.
Yeah.
And I think that we have to think through that. But I also think that we have to sit with the uncomfortable truth that, like, not everyone will get it, not everyone will want to get it. And sometimes that means that not everyone can make it to the other side, right? And that's a hard truth to deal with, but it's one that even Harriet Tubman sat with, right? And that she recognized was the truth. And I think that when we recognize that, right, that sometimes either, like, for some people, we're the ones who plant the seeds and someone else has to grow it, right? We don't get to witness the bloom. But for other people, there never is a bloom. And so long as we planted the seed, I think we've done the job that we can. And we're continuing to do the work for all Black folks so that as many of us as possible can make it to the other side.
Yes.
And you know what? When Rahel was talking about when have you felt most safest, I thought for a lot of these older Black people, that was probably during the Clinton administration politically when they felt the most safest. So it makes very much sense for them to go to a Joe Biden who, patience and grace, and everyone won't make it.
Yeah. And this piece of like, just like giving them some like, everyone will make it, but like also being like, people be surprising you sometimes. Like I've had people surprise me for the worst. I've also had people surprise me for the better, and like that their capacity to dream. Like what we're asking people to do right now, dream, imagine, like their capacity to dream and imagine is like, don't sleep on that. You know? Like this seemed impossible.
I got a lot of talk about imagination, so we'll get to that in a second.
Yes, please, let's talk about imagine, because that's one of my favorite things, like imagination. Like what can you imagine?
I thought about I've been thinking a lot about the project that we worked on, like the Imagine project when we were working like how something like this could really help this movement to put the vision on paper. Okay, Paul says, what about rural communities that are not as diverse, multiracial? How does this impact the community spirit?
Was this asked when we were talking about the Black church?
Yeah.
Sorry, y'all, my phone's about to die. I'm going to step away for 1 second.
Okay.
I think that the answer to that really is that, again, I was born and raised in a small town turned, or a large town turned small city. A growing community with one of the bigger colleges now. The college is growing a lot. But I think that even in small towns, I think we really have to think about what it means to what does it look like? What does the makeup of our churches, our spiritual leaders look like in these moments and in these movements, right? What are they doing to what are they adding to this movement? What are they adding to this moment? How are they assisting you? How are they assisting the community? Right? And I think for me in my small town, right, like most of the preachers there were not assisting the community. They weren't adding to the movement or the moment. And what they wanted to add was only like recapitulating the very or rather reifying the very violences that we were trying to escape. Right? So it's like, if that is the truth, then at some point we have to find something that is more useful for all of us that can still provide for our spiritual well-being. Even though we're not lucky enough to, get out and make it to a city like Atlanta.
Maclot wants you all to talk about the role that imagination plays in abolition. That's a really good question. And why the possibility should excite us.
You want to start, Rahel?
Sure. Okay. It's my favorite thing, imagination.
No, it is. Rahel is so good with this.
I mean, okay. So I think a major part of the role of imagination in abolition, right, is thinking about how absurd and ridiculous our current system is, right? So really, first, just really grounding yourself in that reality that we have a militarized force that is waging a war where there is no war, right? That is being trained literally by foreign forces, quote unquote, is what our borders, but maybe we can get to that later. That considers itself keeping folks safe by punishing after the fact, right? Where there's nothing preventative. That questions the idea of eliminating prisons, that questions the idea of eliminating police by pointing to crimes that have already happened, right? So not thinking at all about the capacity of safety in which harm is prevented and worked through and future harm is prevented. So just ground yourself in how ridiculous that is. And then I think from there, all of a sudden your capacity for what is possible really blows open.
Yeah.
Because you start thinking about how logical it is that when somebody is having a mental health crisis, that a person who is familiar with mental health crises comes and helps that person rather than a person with a gun, right? It starts making sense to you that when instances of domestic violence arise, the force that the community and safety plays a role in preventing domestic violence and helping people find safety, find shelter, remove themselves from the situation. So I think that grounding is really helpful to me. I also think about things like community control a lot, and I keep saying this, but whatever. Community control, because I think that there is a halting that's happened to a lot of us in terms of what is possible in our communities because of what we've been told is valuable right now, right? So we've been told when Da'Shaun earlier was a lot of these schools are violent themselves. I was yes, exactly. We haven't even been able to understand the possibility of having an education that's about learning and expanding horizons and exchanging ideas and isn't about rigid structure, that isn't about discipline, that isn't about control, right? We haven't considered a future that is about safety and community and relationship rather than about control and acquiescing to control, right? So white supremacy has limited our imagination. We consider what is possible, what white supremacy has said is possible. So what is a world outside of white supremacy, right? When you remove white supremacy and white supremacist structures and values from your visions for the future, suddenly everything opens up and it blooms in this way. And you have grounded yourself in the absurdity of the current moment. So you stop like questioning, like every time you have well, that's not possible because, well, what's happening right now isn't possible. Like, and yet here we are. So anything is really possible at this point. And I really feel like there's this like amazing opening up of possibility that happens amidst chaos. And we are in chaos in a lot of ways, right? Nobody thought that Donald Trump was going to be president. Well, you know, someone probably predicted it, whatever. We have allowed like the mechanisms of white supremacy to feel so normal. But like as soon as you start breaking apart how abnormal it all really is and how none of this is organic matter, how it's all being upheld by structures that white supremacy built, like your capacity for imagination really opens up. Yeah.
And COVID has really exposed how broken our systems are.
Yeah.
And like on every level, from how ill-prepared our schools were to our healthcare system was, to like on every level, we have seen how broken American systems are. So I feel like if we don't take advantage of this moment to imagine and start moving towards something that serves us better, this sounds harsh, but I don't think we deserve it if we don't take advantage of this moment.
We have to. And I just, baby, I feel my help. I feel my help. There's something so special about imagination, y'all, for me. Like, and I hear you and I agree completely. And I always say this, like, that white supremacy, anti-blackness really has stunted our ability to imagine. And I think that is actually one of the biggest abuses of anti-blackness, is that it doesn't allow for us to imagine a world beyond this one. Last year I wrote a piece called it's called "When They See Us Yesterday," and in that piece, I'm talking about "See You Yesterday," "See You Yesterday," which is like a sci-fi Black nerd type of movie that was like partly produced by two Morehouse alum. I can't remember the name.
Oh my God.
And then,
I'm gonna need that link later.
Yes. It's on Netflix. And then, or is it called See Tomorrow? It's called See Tomorrow. And then the documentary by Ivor DuVernay, When They See Us. When They See Us.
That's it.
Yes, thank you. I'm like, you're on my mind. But I wrote that piece, and in that piece, I'm talking about, I was imagining what it would look like had the Central Park Five, had they had time travel. Because in See You Yesterday, they built a time machine, right, where they were able to travel back in time, where she was trying to save her brother from being murdered. And so I was imagining what it could look like for them to have a time machine, for them to have had a moment where they were able to go back in time to the moment where they decided to go to that park, right, and have their world change. And by the end of the piece, I start talking about how abolition for me is my time machine. Abolition for me allows for me to move through time in a way that says that the kids, my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' kids are able to be in time, exist in time that's separate from white supremacy, that's separate from anti-blackness. That's what imagination is for me. For me, it is imagining that time travel is not a material machine, right? But it's the ability to aid in a long lineage of the Black liberation movement that moves us to a time where we are free from these pages, from this tale, right? And so when I think about imagination, when I think about imagining beyond this moment, for me, it literally, that's what it means. It means that I get to participate in time travel. It means that I get to participate in creating and conjuring a magical response, right, to a very materialized violence and abuse and harm. And so I always ask people, because, so many people, they push back against police, or they push back against abolition because of, like sexual violence and and domestic violence, and as someone who grew up in a home where there was domestic violence, and someone who is a survivor of sexual abuse and sexual violence, I want to say that I always ask people, you know, what, like, imagine, I'm a really imaginative person. I feel like I'm thinking of like that episode where SpongeBob is like, imagination in the box. That's really me. Like, I just be thinking about all this shit. So it's like, I always ask them, imagine with me, for me, like, what a world could look like for you that not only knows how to respond to that type of violence, but where that violence no longer is an issue, right? Imagine for me that we aren't socialized in this white supremacist world, that we aren't socialized in this really harmful and anti-Black world, right? Imagine that no longer exists. What does it look like? What does your world look like? How does it make you feel? What does it smell like? What does it taste like for you, right? And for me, I think about like the feeling that I used to get as a kid when I was like playing in my nana's backyard while she rocking her rocking chair on her porch, right? Or what I imagine that it feels like what my mom's spaghetti tastes like to me. Nobody makes spaghetti like my mom to me. Nobody, not even me. I tried to make it like her, and I can make it like her for real. Like, but I imagine that my future, my liberated future, feels like what that tastes like to me, right? Or the smell of my nana's perfume when she's going anywhere. She loves this like vanilla smell, and it's so distinct to her. And when I smell it, I feel like that's what my in a future where abolition was made possible looks like. And so that helps me to envision a world that is different from this one, where I can literally see a world without prison, and see a world without gender and sexuality and race and all these things that box us in, that hold us tight, that keep us caged, where we are able to now like envision and walk through a different world. I know this talks a lot, but I love.
No, that was amazing.
That was good. Yeah.
That was beautiful.
So my last question I actually stole from Rahel, and I always use it, and I always give you credit, Rahel. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you?
I love that stuff.
Yeah.
What a blessing to have like. Yeah.
I said it last week in the podcast, and one of my friends was like, "Tell Rahel I'm stealing her question too."
Good.
You're like moving around in the world with the question, Rahel.
That feels so good. Thank you. Imagination.
I think you really asked a lot of questions.
You did.
You covered the things. I think. I would love to name off some book suggestions of folks on that, but
yes,
that was going to be my last question. How can people get involved? Any resources for them, and how can they connect to you all?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I don't know if it's a question that you didn't ask that I should really know, but because we like had a whole conversation and stuff, but I feel like there's these like small pockets and glimmers of possibility, right? And I think that like I would love to hear from both of y'all too, like what like glimmers of possibility or whatever that you have seen, right? Whether that's moments of community safety or moments of community control. I think two of them for me personally have happened in the last couple of weeks, but one was I watched a person that I know post the 8 to Abolition site, and I watched an elder in that person's life respond and be like, I don't know about all this. And then I watched I read on Facebook a back and forth happen about, well, this and that and this and this. And then I watched that elder comment, you know what? I've changed my mind. And I was like, like it just like made me realize how cynical I was being and thinking that that wasn't possible, right? And then another major one, I keep talking about community control. I think a part of it is because I think about I think about all of the assumptions that are made that allow community control to not feel possible, right? Because number one, people assume that people assume that community doesn't know what community needs. People assume that basically white people with more power and money know how to protect us somehow. And people assume that that like the traditional structures, the white supremacist structures of decision making are the only way to make decisions.
Yeah.
And like seeing, first of all, the movement for Black Lives put out at this mobilization and this call to action online, and like really sees the digital realm in that way, opened up possibility. Watching participatory budgeting processes happen opens up a realm of possibility. Watching folks mobilize in DC to add Black Lives Matter equals defund the police to that performative mass piece of art, like watching people feel like mobilized in this moment when like it would be totally understandable if people felt very disempowered or like just tired. Like that has been like the thing, like that has been the glimmer of hope, right? And like that glimmer of possibility for a world that we haven't seen before. Yeah.
And I think when you talk about community, I think a lot about the video I spoke of earlier in New Orleans, where the police just had to release the woman. And also, I believe it was in Seattle, Washington, where someone drove through the barricades, a man got shot. And there's a thread on Twitter that I will have to find and post, but that breaks down everything that happened, how the community told police that the barricade was not good and it could collapse on people. And it was the community who went and fixed the barricade and moved the barricade and moved people that kept people from getting killed. It was the community that came to that man to stop him from causing more harm than he did. It was the community who supported the person who got shot. So you see community showing up, and it's not the police who came to the rescue of anyone in this situation. It was the people in the community who prevented harm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly what Rahel was talking about with like, we create community accountability processes and we create community care, right? Like that's part of what abolitionist work means, right? So, you know, when there are no more police and prisons, and when there are no people to take care of us besides ourselves, we do that as we have been. So what does that look like, and how can we make that possible? How can we make that happen? What does your specific community look like in terms of accountability? How do you imagine creating community accountability processes for your community and with your community?
Yeah.
That's separate from a punitive or carceral or like punishment-led consequence, right?
Yep. Because harm has to, like, the thing that always gets me about carceral and like this like punishment-led, prison-led stuff is that it depends on harm and perpetuating harm, right, to keep moving forward. Like, so you actually need more harm. So you're like, oh, let's build a bigger prison. Let's add more. Like, it necessitates harm and creates it in order to keep itself going.
Right.
Especially when you add private prisons to this. People who are in the prison system to make money.
Yep.
Nothing good can come from that.
Yeah.
All right. Matt Lott has told us to give the literature. So how can people get involved? What should they be reading, listening to, watching, and how can they connect with you all?
Well, I will say I'm excited for Da'Shaun's like book list, because the way you came and got those books, I'm like, ooh, okay, what's next?
Right.
I'm like so here for it. But I think that I'm gonna just say some names, right? So Ruth Wilson Gilmore,
woo,
Angela Davis, Miriam Kaba, Charlene Carruthers. Just look them up, read what they have to say. I also will say that in terms of like we talked about like the shifting of leadership into Black queer hands, and also shift how considering this in like a lineage of liberation movement, I highly recommend that folks read A Taste of Power by Lane Brown. It's about the experience of a Black woman in the Black Panther movement. You know, it's not directly, but it's important grounding in terms of where we're going in terms of leadership, because this shit did not spring up out of nowhere, right? We're standing on the shoulders of giants. So yeah, those are the names I would 100% go look at. I also will say that Critical Resistance, their literature has really shaped my understanding of what is possible outside of this system. Incite, INCITE exclamation point. A lot of their literature, also in terms of how this movement and how momentum can be co-opted by nonprofit industrial complex. Like a lot of my understanding of that comes from them. And in terms of listening to, I feel like that's a place where I'm really lacking. I'm like, I really need something to like listen to. I need something that I can do well. So I'm gonna leave that. And then I really just highly recommend that folks check out like the amazing shit that's coming out right now. Like go to m4bl.org, go to 8toabolition.com. Like I'm like in awe of people that I'm like in community with. Like I'm like, I can't, like it's happening right now, and like it's really not only it's affirming the like value of imagination, right? Because this shit is like beyond what I could have imagined for 5 years ago for right now. Right. So if we keep imagining this way, like possibilities
even
really,
in
like,
March. Even in March,
we
would be here where defunding the police was a mainstream conversation.
Right.
Yep. And the work's been happening. So yeah. Those are the ones. And then if you were trying to plug in, definitely go to m4bl.org. There's a lot of opportunities there. BYP 100 is having a national member kind of like info session if you are a black person between 18 and 35. That's an opportunity to plug in. We also have BYP 100 squad membership for folks over 35. So you can go to byp100.org to find out about that. But yeah.
Awesome. Da'Shaun.
Yes. Hey. I was really taking it in. But yes, I'm Da'Shaun. If you want to find me online on Instagram and Twitter, I am Da'Shaun LH, so DASHAUN LH. And I have a book. I got a bunch of books right here beside me, y'all. I hope y'all don't mind me going through them. Do y'all mind?
Go ahead.
I went and picked up like a bunch of books from my bookshelf because I'm like, baby.
I'm going to make my intern come up with a list so we can do social shares on all these books and authors that y'all are recommending. Yes. My intern is Cameron.
I knew it.
Cameron is out of school and is taking a break, so you got to leave him alone. You got to leave Cameron alone.
Shout out to Cameron. He's the one who has been cutting up all the Real Drunk Show episodes and adding music and graphics to them. Like,
oh my God.
He's been putting in work this time.
I didn't know Cameron was on that wave. Now, I like that.
Okay, professional.
Yes, he is. He's a good intern when he shows up to work.
I wouldn't show up either. I'd be like, "Ma, listen,
right.
I'm out of school."
I'm like 10 to 2, come downstairs, put on clothes every day, and that's all you have to do. And that Negro is like, please, I will do this from my bed at 2:00 in the morning, and you will be
and you will be okay.
Yo.
Literally,
I need a flexible work schedule.
Right. Go ahead, Da'Shaun.
Okay. But yeah, so the first one is Are Prisons Obsolete? You have this is so important. This book tells you why prisons are already a type of reform, how it's like prisons as we know them are like a reform from immediate execution, right? Like, this is really important. This is the book to read for like beginners, and people who are not beginners should return to this book.
Yes.
So this is number one. This one is edited by Angela Davis, but it's like written by Du Bois and Angela Davis and so many other folks. It's called They Come in the Morning, Voices of Resistance. It's really good. It has works from George Jackson, Bobby Seale, James Baldwin, Julian Bond, Huey P. Newton is in here, Angela Davis, W. Du Bois, all of them, they're all in here. This is a harder book to read because it's very academic theory heavy, but it's really, really, really worth it. It's called Discipline and Punish, The Birth of Prison by Michel Foucault.
I read one of his books for
History of Sexuality.
Huh?
History of Sexuality.
Yes, for my queer theology class.
Yes.
That shit is hard.
It's hard. Now it's not easy.
I found myself on YouTube like looking up synopsis for his writing, but it's good stuff.
It's good stuff. When you like, I should say, I recommend that everyone read any book with other people. Like, I don't think you should read any books by yourself. I think you really should sit with other people who share the same politics as you, so that you are making sure that you're getting a good, interpretation from the book, that you are getting a shared interpretation from the book, that, that you're really grounded in what's being written. It's really important.
And questioning it together.
Yes.
This is my nigga. Franz Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask. Brilliant, brilliant book. And I think you have to start with The Wretched of the Earth.
Yes.
That's also a really good book by him. I have it in my room, which is why it's not here. Like, it's so good. This book is really good, but The Wretched of the Earth is so good, y'all. Like, the first chapter is about why violence is necessary to decolonize.
Yes.
This nigga is talking about, baby.
Yes.
Y'all got to read that.
Yes.
This one is called Sojourning for Freedom, Black Women, American Communism, and the Making of Black Left Feminism.
Oh. Wow. I'm sorry, yeah, I'm looking at the comments and the people are coming with good questions.
Oh. Am I going too fast? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. We'll get to the questions. It's about where we buy the books from. Because Amazon feels counterproductive.
Yes.
Yes.
IndieBound. If you go to IndieBound,
yes,
they can point you to your closest local bookstore.
Yes. Okay. As well as Haymarket.
Yes.
Haymarket Books does a really good job. My publishing house, North Atlantic Books. You could probably get some from there, although I don't know if they are selling those. AK Press has a lot of abolitionist text. One of the books here that I have that I'll put up in a second is from there. But also, it is kind of productive to buy from Amazon. And also, y'all, sometimes that's the only place you can find these books.
Yeah.
I hate to say it.
Yeah.
It's hard because the world is run by white supremacists. This book is called, y'all, I love Claudia Jones. She's another one from the Black Panthers. This book is called Left of Karl Marx. It's the political life of Black communist Claudia Jones. So this is a good book to get to.
Verso has free ebooks if they come in the morning.
I wouldn't buy Instead of Prison unless you want the physical copy, because the PDF is free online.
Okay.
Yeah, the PDF is free online, child. So don't pay that money for that. I didn't buy this. Somebody bought it as a gift. And I got it in 2017. So
there was one more question. Could you repeat the number for, hold on, let me take this. Okay. Could you repeat the number to text for a movement for Black Lives?
Yeah, text text Defund, DEFEND to 90975.
Thank you, Mac Lock, for putting all these books in the comments.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to put that number in the comments, that'll be great. When I type in the comments, it like throws my stuff out. It says spam.
Oh no! Why don't you
Right. All right, Rahel, did you tell people where they can find you online, or do you not want them to find you online? It's okay if you don't want them to find you online. I get it.
No, they can find me online. I'm just like not very online. So like I'm online for like work, you know, but I'm trying to get better at it. So you can find me on Twitter at MEQDit. So it's MEQDIT. MEQDT. And you can find me on Instagram at RMEKDIM. RMEKDIM. Yeah, maybe you'll find me and I'll be like better at interneting now. Maybe I'll get better. So let's see.
That's real. Yeah, one more book and then I'm finished. I promise.
You can find us at realdrunkshow.com, and if you go there, you can see links to videos from all our past shows, as well as links to our podcast.
Yes.
You can find them. This podcast should be up by Sunday. Is this another book?
Yeah, I have 4 other ones.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I didn't want to interrupt you, girl.
No, okay. Go with the books, because books are...
LOL. This one is called Stokely Speaks. It's by Stokely Carmichael, a.k.a. Kwame Ture. We respect our ancestors' names, but yes.
Wait, you respect your ancestors' names, so you don't wear like shirts that say, we are not our ancestors. These hands? Because that seems like kind of counterproductive to respecting your ancestors. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now the title of this book is funny, y'all, but I'm gonna say it. It's called Die Nigger Die. And it's a book written by Jamil Al-Ackman, also known as H. Rap Brown. And it's a really good book. It's one of the first books to radicalize me, where he talks about race, class, prisons, all of that in a really like non-academic way. Like this nigga was calling white folks honky donks and shit. Like, I love this book. It's so good.
What year was it published?
Huh?
What year was it published?
No, that's a good question. Let's see.
It's okay. It's just me being nosy and wondering.
Like, I don't know, but it's an older book for sure. This one is called Black as Resistance by Zoe and William. They're both on Twitter. Really brilliant Black anarchists. And then the last one is called The Prison Letters of George Jackson, which is another book that first radicalized me. And yes, so those are the books. I just be in here reading, y'all, and drinking water. That's it.
That's why you got good skin.
Right. More people should do that. Read and drink your water. Thank y'all for joining us tonight. We will be back with more next week. Check the website, the Twitter and Instagram pages for more details. Have a great night. Bye-bye.